There we go.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
No. Okay. Sure. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome for joining us for the AAC Careers Explained webinar. This is the second webinar of the series, which focuses on the E of AAC, which is engineering. But more specifically, we'll be going into building engineering. At the next webinar, we will go into civil engineering. So let's go over the agenda. First, we will go into what the foundation is about. We'll have our vice president introduce the foundation. Then we'll go into the project roles. And then finally, we'll have our Q&A with our wonderful panel, whom we will introduce soon. So welcome Janica Baker to introduce the foundation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here this evening. I'm Janica Baker with NAC Architecture and the Vice President of the AAae Foundation. Every year, the foundation dedicates itself to helping students and young professionals from things like scholarship support to things like educational events such as this webinar. We are always looking for students to come participate, to find out more about us, and to volunteer for the things that we do. We have scholarship committees, student outreach committees, and just ways to engage in the AEC industry. At this young age, it's really important to get out there and see what we do in the real world, and this is a really great way to do that. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of this webinar.
So yeah, hey, and my name is Alex Lin. I am also the co-chair with Good of Crystal for the AAA Foundation for Student Outreach. And this slide shows the project owners, really our project cycles among the AEC industry. We really typically start with a project owner. So these owners are government agencies and private developers. So they are the landowners who gives out the RFP, which is request for proposal. Then the proposal so usually gets asked for a quote by the prime consultants, which is the architects and engineers. They will then also, we need the mechanical MEPs, mechanical and electrical plumbing, which is our panel today. And then after the MEPs, we go into construction and how it actually gets built. So today I will pass it to Jason, who will introduce our panel of MEP engineers.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of AAae Foundation and my fellow board members, Crystal and Alex, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for the evening. Nick Twong is a construction engineer with University Mechanical. Amanda Shade is Director of Project Management Development at AAae Engineered Systems. John Robertson is a Senior Mechanical Engineer and Project Manager with GluMac. Matt Barnard is a principal with Dagan-Kolb Engineers. And Brian Kiwo is president and founder of Kiwo Engineering. I'll be your moderator for the evening. My name is Jason Yang, and I am with Thornton Tomasetti. Before we jump in, I'd just like to remind our participants to please add any questions they may have to the chat box, and we'll address them towards the end of the Q&A.
Oops. Oops.
And so
that.
Not a problem. To start, I'd like to just give each of the panelists a chance to introduce themselves in greater detail. It would be great if each of the panelists could state the number of years they've been in the industry and the types of projects they work on, followed by anything else you want to add about yourself or your firm. So Nick, I'll pass off the mic to you.
All right, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I just got off the clock, so good to see everyone and speak for all of you today. My name is Nick Tong. I am a construction engineer at University Mechanical. and I am a first-generation Vietnamese American, and I graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in mechanical engineering. During the class, I specialized in HVAC systems, and outside of class, I studied manufacturing and prototyping. I've been an active member of the ACE Mentor Program for about 10 years, and I've been in industry for about two and a half. And fun fact about me is I am quadlingual.
Thanks, Nick. That's actually very interesting. What four languages do you speak, if you don't mind me asking?
All right, we'll go. So Vietnamese is my mother tongue, then English, Spanish, and German.
Very cool. Next, I'd like to ask the same question to Amanda.
I always hate following Nick because he is the best speaker. I say it every time.
Don't
Amanda
make me blush in
Shade,
public.
Director of Project Management Development at AAae Engineered Systems. Mechanical, so that was brought up before. So that's my degree. I'm a mechanical engineering major from UC San Diego. And I have about 14 years in the industry, and 9 of that in the project management realm at AAae. And my role as a project management development is mostly working with our project engineers on their skill sets to prepare them for the project management role. And then I also work with newer PMs. Maybe they were recently promoted or came to AAae from another company, but really there to help support the success of our project managers at the company.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that's a really interesting role that kind of branches out from your typical technical roles that we hear about.
It does. It merges, I think Nick mentioned ACE Mentor, which I've been a part of for a long time too, but it merges my passion for mentorship with my skills as an engineer and love for project management. I'm very lucky that I got to put all those things together.
Wonderful. John, I'll pass it over to you.
Good evening, John Robertson with GlueMac. I'm a Lone Star Region Department Manager and one of our firm's water systems thought leaders. Overall, about 15 years in the industry doing mechanical engineering, plumbing engineering, water systems. Graduated from Mississippi State University way back in the day, and a degree in mechanical engineering, and kind of bounced around all over the U.S. and have found myself in Texas now, and kind of similarly volunteer with ACE. And this fall, we're combining 2 of my loves, barbecue and ACE, and doing a fundraiser here in Texas because it's the Texas thing to do.
That sounds tasty. And Matt, we'll go over to you.
Sounds good. So good evening, all. My name is Matt Barnard. I am a principal with Degenkolb Engineers. So I am a structural engineer. Is what I've done. I graduated actually as a civil engineer first, and then got a professional, got my structural engineering license. Been in the field for over 20 years now. As my role, I am the structural engineer of record on buildings. I project manage, I sell, I pretty much do a little bit of everything in my role. Type of work, I primarily do a lot of healthcare, higher education, existing building stuff. That's really seems to be what I enjoy and what I gravitate towards on a daily basis.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the fact that you have to wear many hats.
Yes, indeed.
And finally, we'll go over to Brian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Kiwo. I'm founder and president of Kiwo Engineering. We do a lot of electrical projects, some buildings, but a lot of high voltage infrastructure projects. So I graduated from Cal Poly Pomona about 14 years ago in electrical engineering. So that's the field I've been in mostly. I received a master's in electrical engineering from USC and a master's in financial engineering also from USC. So I started my career with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, did a lot of substation work, project management. So that gave me a lot of experience. And after about 6 or 7 years, I had a personal goal to leave, start my own company, and that's what I did. And so the later half of my career, I've been doing similar work. We touch on some buildings, but most of my work is in infrastructure, a lot of substations, transmission, renewable work, and so forth. So Happy to be here.
Thanks, Brian. I actually thought that master's was really interesting, financial engineering. Can you chat a little bit about it and what that entails? Or?
I think a lot of people who go into it, they become quantitative analysts and do the thing that caused the 2008 crash. But I was able to sell that to LADD, paid for it, since I told them we'll do forecasting on asset management when transformers will die. But I was always interested in kind of the business side, and that's half engineering, half on the business. So, but it was a good experience, and it has helped me now that I start my own business.
Really interesting. Thanks, Brian. So for our next general question, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to briefly trace your career path for the audience. When and why did you initially choose your discipline? And how did your career evolve into your current position and role? And just to change it up a little bit, we'll start with Amanda this time.
Careful what I wish for, right? So when I was in high school, I was trying to figure out, I think that's a pivotal moment for a lot of us, right? Because we're asked to commit to something. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I was very good at math. And then I'm going to date myself here, the first Fast and the Furious movie came out, and I was reminded how much I loved cars. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer because I'm going to design cars. And I think a lot of us start that way. And then you go to college and your mind is open to all the things that mechanical engineers do, which is more than you'll ever even know. They touch everything. So I really got excited about the thought of being a part of a building, something that stood tall that you could see for your lifetime, and something where I could make an impact on energy usage and the environment. And, I got excited about that. And I started working with a consulting firm in San Diego called AAae Engineers as a design engineer. And I worked there for a couple of years until I moved up closer to the LA area. And then I worked as an energy engineer with a company called McKinstry. And they're based out of Seattle, but they had a startup office that I was excited to be a part of. And I got to do the design engineering, but also energy engineering and dealing with kind of the money aspects that Brian was mentioning. Do projects pay out? Does it make sense? And then I loved project management. So, it kind of evolved, design to energy to managing the construction projects. And I switched to that role in 2012. Yeah, 2012. But having that design foundation made the job makes so much more sense. It's so much easier to build something when you understand the purpose of what you're building and how it's supposed to work. And so I did that up until last October, and that's when I switched into the role that I'm in now.
Perfect. As someone else who actually got a mechanical engineering degree, your story about cars really resonated with me.
It's more people than I ever thought.
100%. Also a total Fast and the Furious fan.
Yep.
We'll go over to John next.
So similarly, thought I was going to be a glorified car mechanic once I graduated college. But kind of the definition of making it in Mississippi is, did you make it out? And so I had a couple of different job offers getting out of college, one of which was in Walnut Creek, California, doing environmental engineering support buildings for major infrastructure projects like wastewater and water treatment projects. And that was a good choice for me. That was about as far away from Mississippi as I could get. And the work seemed interesting. And what was even better about it was CDM is a big conglomerate firm. And so they had a process and a form for near about everything. So it was a great way to learn engineering. But since I was in the building services group, I was a very, very small fish in this very big pond of industrial engineering. So similarly, I had to wear a lot of hats, learning mechanical, learning plumbing, learning fire protection, energy modeling, drafting, a little bit of project management thrown in there. And so it gave me the opportunity in a safe environment with relatively low risk to explore a bunch of different paths. After about 5 years of doing that, I got hit by the sustainability bug and made the move over to Integral Group and worked in their Oakland office for about 5 years before moving to Austin, Texas to start up a practice here with the Integral Group. And it was really there that I learned two things. Be careful what you get good at. I got a little bit too good at drafting, and I made the conscious decision that I did not want to do that as far as like my day-to-day. But also by having a large breadth of experience and knowledge path, it gave me a lot of opportunity. Where water is nowadays is kind of where energy was 15 years ago. We're just now starting to get into the nuts and bolts of it, starting to get to net zero water and net positive water solutions. Codes are starting to be written there. And so by having this experience in plumbing and being able to do that, it opened me up to this entire new field. And one of my great mentors always used to say, "Are you ready, willing, and able?" And I found my opportunity with plumbing as far as something to specialize in, really leading the charge in data-driven design, pushing the envelope with what is possible in sustainability. And this past December, decided to take my career to the next step and join the Blue Mac team and help rebuild the office here in Austin, as well as kind of raise the bar as what we can do as a firm and what kind of excellence we can push out.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that trajectory. One thing I just noticed between your story and Amanda's is kind of the organic evolution of your professional interests during the course of your career. So I think that was really interesting. Matt, we'll pass this over to you.
Sounds good. So, starting from high school, I was pretty fast and furious. So I was I actually came out wanting to do chemistry. Loved it, thought it was fun. And I went to college and quickly realized it wasn't as much fun as I had thought it was. And so I decided to transition over to the engineering college at UC Davis. And there was one major that was impacted. That was civil engineering. And you had to get on a wait list to get into it. And once there's just some rules, it was my one time to get into it. So I kept my options open, said, well, I'll try that until I find something else that I may want to do. Then became a degree, then became a master's degree at Illinois. As I kind of continued to specialize and realize I actually really liked it. I liked translating a vision, an architect's vision, an owner's vision, giving it structure, literally, that could then support that vision to be able to make great spaces happen. And so I kept diving into it, worked my internships, and eventually decided to interview with Degenkolb Engineers. Interviewed with them, fell in love with the firm. I can speak to it a little bit as to why, but then from there have grown. I've been with the firm my entire career, and I really don't expect to be anywhere else for the next half of my career. So now my role, when I first started, I was a designer. Doing the basic work that you need to do to learn the craft. And as I got better at it, my role started to evolve. I started to pick up project management. And once I understood how to direct people and manage work, then I started evolving into more of a leadership role, where in that leadership role, my job was no longer to always tell somebody what to do, but to get people to do what was right on their own. And so that's where my career has evolved as I've built that tool set, and that's where I sit today.
Thanks, Matt. I think it's fantastic that you've had your entire career with a single firm, and I think that speaks incredibly highly of them. So it's increasingly rare nowadays. And I believe Brian, you're next.
So I was also in the Fast and Furious phase during my high school, college, but more on the illegal street racing side than influence to engineering. So I actually didn't decide my major until I already started transferring out of junior college. Or out of a community college. So I didn't make the decision until I was a junior. Basically, I applied to Cal Poly. I knew I was good at math. And I knew I was going to do something with engineering. I just looked at what they had. I actually applied and got in as a math major, I believe. And then I just decided to to swap it because someone told me, yeah, you're not going to get a job with the math unless in academics. I'm like, all right, let's switch it over. And I just selected electrical engineering. So that's kind of how I got into it. Again, I've always been inclined towards something technical, math. Although I wasn't very good student in high school, I was a kind of a D, some F students, but I knew I had to get it together when I got married kind of early in my age. And I figured, I gotta turn my life around and go to college. And then eventually went through junior college. And then after I graduated, I decided to go with, or transferred, I decided to go with electrical engineering. And so since then, I've been enjoying it because I think there's a lot of changes happening, especially now with renewables. A lot of money to be made as well, a lot of work to be done. So I can go to that in further detail, but my role has been a lot with engineering and more so on the business side, a lot of proposals on the project management side. And I think managing people, that's been even more difficult than engineering. Engineering is more of, you know how to do it, but retaining talent, acquiring new talent and so forth. That's been a challenge, but it's an enjoyable one.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing, Brian. And finally, we'll pass it over to Nick.
Before I go, I just want to say I admire everyone's story here about how they're just looking back and connecting the dots of how they ended up where they are today. And as for me, I think out of all of the entire panel, I am the one with the least amount of years in industry. So I still have my chipmunk cheeks and just like, oh my God, everything's beautiful kind of deal. And so for me, I did not start off with the Fast and Furious. No, instead, I built a transformer when I was only 6 years old because I can do that, right? No, I'm just kidding. I did not start off with that. Though I did like Transformers, so that's where I'm starting. And one thing that I really liked studying in college was the fact that I got to be near hardware or near the thing that I was either designing, building, or working on. I wanted to have that tangible evidence and sight so that anything I design, anything I'm paying for, anything that I make mistakes with, anything that I triumph with, I physically can see what happens. So I passed that on to my mentors and anyone I interviewed, and I ended up in construction, in building construction in particular, where you will definitely see things get built. And day by day, you really don't notice it. And one thing I've noticed that's very common amongst the construction industry is that you will see like very little changes and then really fast changes really quickly. And then you'll take pictures of them. And then you'll look back and think like, wow, all that headache was totally worth it. Or wow, it's like, I made that happen. And then when you drive by, you can point up to all your friends and lovers. It's like, yeah, it's like, look, I built that. It's like, that's what I want to say. So with 2 years in, I can say that about a few places, some of which are closed to the public, but slowly but surely, when I reach the decade mark, I'll come back as a presenter and then show a bunch of pictures, be like,
We're looking forward to that date. And yeah, I completely agree with you. It's nice being able to have a tangible finished product that you can point to. For my next general question for the panelists, I'm going to kind of dive into the day-to-day life of your profession. So what is the significance of your discipline, and what role do you play on a typical design team? And then how does your role evolve during the project lifecycle? And for this one, let's start with John.
So plumbing systems are the way that things move in a building. So we all have water that we need to drink. We all have waste that we produce, and we all have energy needs to move throughout a building. So that's really what plumbing is. Sometimes I call it the second oldest profession because it's been around for 4,000 plus years. But and a lot of people don't necessarily see the artistry in it because there's so many constraints, and because it's probably one of the most defined disciplines other than maybe civil engineering. But within those constraints, there's a lot of art that can be found, and plumbing has a slightly different trajectory than the rest of the building. So when you're talking about the story of the building and you're talking about how the building evolves, all that starts with, of course, a great foundation, but below the foundation are the plumbing pipes, because I don't know if you've noticed, but water generally likes to roll downhill. So if we're not at the lowest, if we're not below the foundation, then things do not drain correctly, and you have a very upset client when pipes flow the wrong way. So plumbing is very heavily involved at the onset of a project, determining where our points of connection are going to be, determining where our interface with civil engineering is going to be, determining what the roof drainage for stormwater is going to be throughout the building. And all of this has to go back to safety as well, and hygienics. So we want everything to be sanitary. We don't want cross contamination. You don't want to deal with a lot of the smells that come with sewer systems, and we don't want to critically harm anyone anywhere. So if you're thinking about hot water, making sure that you don't have the what I call it the little brother analogy, where they like to flush the toilet on you when you're in the shower and burn you. So those are some of the things that we do as plumbing engineers. And as the project evolves, as my role has evolved over the years, it's been more starting out with kind of those early details, getting the bones of the building correct, and getting kind of the early coordination out of the way. And once you do that, there's not a whole heck of a lot you need to do other than make sure your pipes don't move. So design has a lot of impact over the course of the project. If, say, a floor-to-floor height gets changed, or a drain gets added at a very remote location of the building, that can cause problems down the line. And so in a lot of that void, assuming nothing changes, I like to do modeling and data-driven design, and try to push different ways that we can transform the building. So we start out with kind of this code prescriptive, very table-based plumbing system. And as we go through design, we're refining it. Maybe we start bringing on reuse systems. Maybe we downsize our meter size. Maybe we reuse some of our waste on site in an imaginative way, such as taking the air conditioner condensate and using that for landscape irrigation. So we can provide a little bit more resiliency in what we do. And then once we get towards the end of the project, unfortunately with my role nowadays, I kind of move on to other things, making sure the whole cart is moving forward. And I've got my detailers and my engineers working for me to help execute that design at the very end of the project. So kind of between all these different people in my own group running around, and coordination with a bunch of other engineers to make sure we've got one cohesive building, I guess you could sum it up as kind of herding cats for a living. So there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of people that move in their own direction at their own pace. And yeah, it's been a fun adventure.
I appreciate you mentioning kind of the coordination that's required between yourself and civil engineering disciplines. Would you say for plumbing that a lot of your design effort is fairly front-loaded in the project lifecycle, more along?
Correctly. So we have our core elements, such as your stairs, your elevator, your building massing, your building orientation. And once you get moving, you can imagine how big of a impact it would be if you have to move a riser from one side of the building to another, or if you're getting most of the way through design and you realize you can't meet gravity to your sewer. So now you've got to coordinate with civil to add a big sump pump or a big pump to move it away from your building. So a lot of what plumbing is front loading, looking into our magic crystal ball and predicting what the life cycle of the building is going to be within a certain realm of constraints.
Noted, thanks. And we'll go over to you, Matt.
Sounds good. So yeah, my role is, structure. That's what I do. And we all kind of know what structure is because it's the equivalent to the skeleton, right? Of who you are. It's the bones of the building. So what do I have to design that for? First I have to fit within the space constraints that the architect has defined for the vision of the building. I got to get those bones inside that. Nobody likes their bones outside of it, right? You got to get the bones in there. And then from there, I got to design it to account for things sounds simple, but gravity, right? We all, we got to make sure we have that. We got to account for things that push a building, wind, earthquake, elements of that nature, and then things that land on the building, rain, snow, other elements. We got to account for the contents that go into it. We got to design all of those bones to be able to support that. And within doing that, that's where we provide the structure to be able to support the build out. All of the MEP systems that we're talking about, all of the architecture, the partitions, all of those things rely on our structure. So we got to make sure we design it in a way that can be able to support that once it gets developed to the point that it's ready to be supported. Now, how does that happen in the course of a project? Really, we start often, again, early in the project by having some discussions about what is the aspirations for the building, the overall performance of the building that's desired. Is it life safety? Is it something more? What are the materials that we want to use for the building? Is it concrete, steel, wood, masonry? What is the right one? And within that context, then what is the systems that are going to be used? Is it braces, frames, walls for resisting seismic and wind? Or is it, joists and slabs and other elements that resist the gravity loads, whatever it may be. So a lot of that happens up early. And then during the course of the remainder of the project, we continue to refine those big picture items into tangible elements that are designed, pieces, then the connections of the pieces. We keep refining and refining and refining until all of a sudden we say, yep, it's ready to be built. And then it gets built. And we spend sometimes years afterwards fixing the gaps in what we said was ready to get built, to providing clarifications, to providing oversight to make sure that the interpretations are right, because we got to make sure that it's not only is our design right, but it's built right per our intentions, because people's lives are going to be dependent on that structure. So that's how kind of it evolves. And while you're doing all that, then you're looking for what's next. So there's always kind of this pattern that you're doing it over and over again and building towards. It's a fun process.
Thanks, Matt. And Brian, we'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so you all know what electricity is. It's important to power your accessories. As far as buildings, we're usually not the lead. We work with other trades, the architect as well, and the owner. And some changes in our industry is energy efficiency. So we look into that as far as lighting, limiting certain loads. There's also been added loads, especially with electrical vehicle chargers and electric buses. So we've been doing a lot of those projects. So as far as the buildings, we're involved a lot in the beginning on the design phase of the project. And then when we get to construction, we support that. There's always RFIs where we support, and of course closeout. If it was not a building project, usually electrical takes the lead. If it's a distribution, automation, substation, or transmission. So I do a lot more of those projects, and so we usually take the lead. We lead a lot of projects as far as the project management, the money, dealing with the money, resources, and so forth. As far as my role, we actually start even before the project begins, because we go through the bidding cycle, stakeholder engagement, and even just to get them to issue that work, which we then bid on. After we complete the project, we support them. There's also, keeping the stakeholders happy, the owners happy. And there's a lot of work in electrical, and so there's always work to be done. So they keep on issuing work, and we're happy to help support them.
Thanks, Brian. For projects where you guys aren't the prime, when are you typically brought onto the design team and engaged?
We're usually brought in early in the bid. So when we do teaming, we identify, or the prime identifies who they want as part of the team. When there's occasions where they haven't identified the electrical, it's probably because it's either a small project or something happened and they're scrambling to look for an electrical. But they need to be brought in early, because you got to know the loads, and then you have to work with the utilities, which oftentimes are slow to get a service request. So they become the critical path, especially if you're requesting for a large load at a facility.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Nick, I think you're next.
All right. So my role as a construction engineer is effectively the liaison between the design team and the physical construction team. So I don't really have too much influence on the actual design, at the very least at the current. There's like if you're not at the beginning of a project, but for the most part, you are interpreting the designs. You are figuring out how to translate the design to what happens in real life. You are here to you're here to interpret like why designs were made, and finally when things are all built, did it work, did it succeed in this area, did it fail, is it oversized, is it overpriced, right? And it's kind of like when you do your homework, right? They always tell you the last step is to check, does your answer make sense? A lot of my job is, does this make sense to what the owner wants, what the design is meant for, and how to actually build it in a nutshell.
Thanks, Nick. And finally, we'll head over to Amanda.
So HVAC, I'm going to oversimplify a little bit, no one cringe, but I just like to say in short that we're the ones responsible for the air in the building. So that's heating the air, cooling the air, and also ventilation, which is keeping things fresh. There's a lot of air we don't necessarily want to breathe, and that's become a bigger topic this past year than it's been before. And at least in California, we've always prioritized the cooling, but ventilation has become increasingly important. We do other specialty systems like steam or other things like that, humidification, dehumidification, but primarily just think air for the most part with what we do. And in the design phase, we are involved earlier than you would think. The architect and structural team, civil team, they'll come out with the schematics for the type of building and project that we're looking at. But from an HVAC perspective, we'll do load calculations to see what types of systems, the size that we'll need to heat and cool the building and ventilate the building. And we'll also be evaluating compliance with Title 24 in California, which is our energy requirements. And so we can provide that early feedback to the architect of maybe we need to change window types or something like that because we're having a hard time meeting that energy compliance. So from a design standpoint, we can be involved from that perspective very early. And then once the spaces are drawn out, we can draw out our systems of, what air will serve which rooms, and which system types we're using. And then the design towards the tail end gets more into what we'll say is like the operations of the systems. So we figured out the size of the systems and the types of the systems. We've laid them all out, the quantities of air and the size of ductwork and all of that stuff. But then we also have the controls, the building automation system. So we want to think about how the system is actually going to operate. So those are the types of tasks that we do. We keep them in mind during design. We will make decisions along the way, but there's a lot of focus at the end of design on those types of details. And then in project management, I'm fortunate to work at AAae because we're design build. So I have the opportunity to manage the design phase as well as the construction phase. That's a huge advantage because you're very aware of how you plan to build it or, the constructability of something, and you can give that feedback all throughout design to make your life a whole lot easier when it comes time to build. But just like Nick mentioned, when it comes time to build the project, it's a whole matter of making sure we're installing per that design intent, that it's the right quality, that everything is matching, really the performance and quality that the owner is expecting from the plans and specs.
Wonderful. I noticed that you mentioned design build there. It seems to be a more common project delivery method. I hate to put you on the spot, but do you think you could quickly just chat about the differences between a design build and design bid build for our student attendees?
Sure. There are a few different common bid strategies or project strategies. I'll call it a plan and spec, but that's probably more straightforward. We're a consulting firm, which is what I started as, a consulting engineer. We'll work with the design team. So the design team will put out a set of plans and specifications and any other supporting documents to an owner who's then going to send out that RFP and request bids from general contractors and subcontractors for that scope that they've defined. And then other times you're going to have, a general idea. The owner kind of knows what they want, but they may want to use a design build team. And so in that case, the person building it may also be the person designing it. And it may not be that every contractor on the job is doing both. You may have some that use consulting engineers and a contractor. You may have some contractors that perform both. But design build is when the subcontractor themselves or the contractor is responsible for designing and installing. And then you will run into something that's kind of in between, a design assist, which we won't get too into it, but you do have an engineer of record, but you may also have a contractor that's capable of design, and they kind of bring their ideas and their efforts together. And a big benefit of that is that it can help the constructability ideas be brought in earlier, but it can also kind of speed things along for the overall project timeline.
I appreciate you kind of elucidating on that point.
No problem.
So that's the end of the general questions for each of the panelists, and now we'll move on to kind of individual questions. Our first question is for Nick, but after he's concluded his response, I invite any of the panelists to chime in, and if you have anything to add. So for Nick, our first question is, how has your cultural and ethnic background affected your career path? Were there any advantages or disadvantages? If you did run into challenges, how did you overcome them?
All right. I thought long and hard about this question. So culturally, so I am a first generation Vietnamese. My parents immigrated and they escaped from the Vietnam War to come to America. And culturally, we endure, right? We power through, we work very hard, we're very dedicated to our craft, right? And being raised with that, you learn to stomach a lot of really, really difficult situations, right? One of my favorite ones is very lighthearted, is how to make free flip-flops. Is you take some shoes, just any shoes, like the heel part, cut that heel part off, and boom, you got a free pair of flip-flops. And it comes from any shoes, and that would be your pair of flip-flops for the next 3 years, because until it withers down to the atom, you'll still use it. It's fine. And you know what? You're using our ability to endure and resist and persevere through difficult times for a pair of really struggle chanclas, right? So that was the culture that I was raised with. And then obviously the advantage of that is, the hard times are a little easier because you're willing to do what's hard so that your life is easy. But if it's misguided, you end up taking things and doing things that aren't really conducive to your health, or they don't thrive. They're meant to survive. So career-wise, a lot of times I find myself just stomaching situations, right? It's like, oh, someone's not responding to me, or it's like, or oh, this thing is just very difficult. I'm just gonna keep working at it, keep powering through, keep trying to do it myself, or just keep going with the convention that I know. No, I don't think about other ways to do things, or is there a more effective way to do it, a more efficient way to do this? Something maybe I can delegate it, right? Those thoughts sometimes become secondary if the strength becomes misguided. So career-wise, it would help. It very much helps to understand not just where to apply, your grit, but also use your grit wisely. It's a really powerful weapon, but it could wear you out if used improperly, and it stalls progress, and it stalls, how you take your career too. You can also grow slower as an individual if you just take what's given to you, and without question.
I appreciate you speaking on that, Nick. I understand it's a bit of a heavy topic, and it's not always easy to speak about. I'll open the floor to any other panelists. If not, we can move on.
Yeah, I could empathize with that. I'm also I guess, first generation. My parents immigrated here. I was born in Indonesia. So I think, and I didn't know this at the time, but just looking back on how that impacted me, I think very similar, and I think I can empathize more. Since we grew up poor, although I didn't feel it at the time, looking back, like, hey, you're pretty poor. So it's easy for me to look at the difficulties going on and saying it's not really that difficult. And the big plus is we're here in the United States. So no matter what challenges come in, like, let's say if I were to fail in my business, I mean, worst case is still have a roof over my head. I still have a good career, still have the degree. and it's easy to get a job still. Whereas in another country, no matter how talented you are, it's still very difficult. So, when I face challenges, I can say, hey, it can't be that bad because I'm still going to be okay. So I think it's good to have that perspective in that we're in a really good country where business thrives, and we should take advantage of it and be fortunate that we're here and not somewhere else.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. I find that to be a very optimistic perspective. So that's fantastic. Okay, for our second question, it's directed towards Amanda. Did you ever second guess your education or career path during your time in college? And how did you address that doubt?
Absolutely. I think most of us probably did. I remember once wanting to switch to more of a business major because I thought it was so interesting. Some of my friends were doing it. I was listening to what they were learning about in class, and I just really liked it. I thought it sounded more interesting. Now, I didn't dislike engineering, but in that moment, that seemed more exciting. I might have been in a challenging math class or something at the time and I was getting drawn away. But I realized I liked both. And I remember I asked my mom about it, and she actually gave me really good advice. Don't tell her. But she said, you can absolutely have a career that includes both engineering and the business side. She said, but if you continue school with engineering and get your degree in engineering, the business will come fairly easy later on. But if you switch your major to business and you decide later on you want to do engineering, it's going to be a lot more challenging for you. And so that was the reason. I said, okay, well, I want to do both. And I think that sounds like a solid plan. She was totally right. So, I mentioned my career path earlier, and I absolutely got to do both. But I was very grateful that I started with engineering in the beginning.
That is very insightful advice. I have a friend who transitioned from engineering into law, and he said the same thing. It's easier to teach an engineer law than teach a lawyer engineering. So I'll open up the floor to any other panelists if they'd like to speak on that question, and if not, we'll move on.
It was about I guess year 3 in my undergrad when I realized the school I had signed up for, mechanical engineering, meant manufacturing, and I don't know. Manufacturing, you design an assembly line once, and then you're just kind of maintaining it the rest of your life. And so I got a little disheartened when a lot of my classes and curriculum were geared at designing widgets and things that spin and yada yada yada. But it was then that I think really pushed me to figure out what I could do with my career. I was going into my 4th year, so I started taking a bunch of electives over at the Career Center. I think I signed up for every interview that I could just to talk to people, just to see what a life in engineering was about. And it honestly was a fluke that I took a class in HVAC, and another fluke that one of the many dozens of interviews I went with were with an environmental engineering firm, and it just it all synced. And so that doubt that I had kind of midway or through the second half of education, it was really through the interviewing process and kind of figuring out on my own what the different career paths were within my major that I really settled on building science.
I love that word you use, fluke. Sometimes our life is defined by those flukes. Fantastic. I'll move on to the next question, which is addressed for 3 of our panelists. And the question is, what is the most important thing you gained out of school that has helped you make the transition from being a student to an industry professional? And we'll start with Nick.
All right. So as I am recently kind of out of school, not terribly long ago, my perspective of it is, I think my favorite thing that I took from college was purpose. Yeah, define is like walk out with purpose, with intention, with conviction. in everything that you do, even if it's something that you don't know that you like or don't like. So I like to think about this in terms of, you know, my experience with prototyping, right? I got into prototyping because honestly, just because I thought 3D printing was cool, right? And I can just keep tooting that horn. But if I stay there, it's like, oh, just because it's cool, just because it's cool. Like, you don't, it's kind of hard to relate to. It's like, we don't know why it's cool, right? It's like, we don't know what you're actually doing. You're just making things for the sake of making things, right? Or you're just looking at things, like you're kind of a bystander to your own craft, right? So, but if you have a sense of purpose, it's like, no, I want to prototype because I get to see things. It's like I get to see things develop before they're a concept, right? And when you're prototyping, you think about the end result at the beginning, more so because now things are actually being, you know, tested for your eyes. So that way you don't have to learn that mistake over in the future. And having that foresight gives you a value. It's like, oh, and then you carry yourself with that. It's like, one of my values is believing in foresight. I'm a type A planner. You can say things like that. And when you say things like that, you market yourself better and you have a more targeted way to live as opposed to just taking anything that comes by you as it goes.
Thanks, Nick. And Amanda, same question.
My inspiration comes from shop class, where I had to actually build the things that I designed, and I learned very quickly how important it is to consider constructability when you're designing something. Otherwise, it never comes off the paper. And so I think that, you know, I fell in love with shop class. I was very good at it, still like to make things at home. But getting that sense of the end use of what you were doing, it's very similar to Nick's answer, actually, the purpose, but you know, what's the end game of what I'm doing? And in taking shop class and understanding that it had to be built and used made me very practical. And I think that that's a huge advantage when it comes to our industry, is designing things that are practical.
Absolutely agree. And John, same question to you as well.
For me, it was one of the things that helped me transition a lot from a student to a professional was this idea of curiosity, and being able to translate kind of some of these ideas that were bouncing around in my head into practical application. So there's one class in particular, it was engineering dynamics, where we were using math models to describe how things moved in reality, which then we could change to a heat analogy or an electrical analogy or a water analogy. And no matter how we defined it, it was all energy at the end of the day. And this curiosity just led from one thing to another, and it just kind of snowballed. And this idea that there's more than one way to explain something and to use all these different analogs until you find a way that makes sense for you. That's a lot how I've gone through my career, is thinking about things in different ways, taking these ideas and these analogies and this curiosity that I developed during school and learning how to talk about it in different ways and apply it in different ways.
Thanks, John. And once again, I'll open up the floor to any of the other panelists if they want to mention anything else.
I'll chime in a little bit on this. You know what I'd say from school teaches you a bunch of tools. It is not the end all. Like, wait, your tools are transferable. So much like you went into school with, you know, a bunch of tools available to you that help you get through it, you're learning skills there that you then transfer to the real world. And even if you start as one thing, you can always transition later too, as long as you remember back to those tools and leverage them and stay true to the fundamentals behind them. That's what I learned from school, was the fundamentals and how to look for the fundamentals. And now I leverage them every day, even to this point.
I agree with what Matt's saying there. It's a lot of it goes to the basics, the fundamentals. For me, as well as with being resilient. So I came into college, you know, really just to get a good job and get a better life. And so that was the end goal. And so looking back, I think what it gave me was really options, because even if I went electrical or civil or mechanical, you as long as you do well, you get a good job. And that's exactly what I did. I went with electrical. Now I have the luxury to choose whatever I want to do. And so during that time, I went to DDP, and they paid well. You work 40 hours a week, but you have all this other time. So I started exploring what I was curious in before. Like I was curious in civil, and started reading on it, did some work, and then got a license in civil. Same thing with mechanical, then pursued that license. And now it's like construction, got that certification. And more recently is like cybersecurity, getting those. So I think the point is to be resilient and know that once you get a good job, you have all these options. And so if you're interested, you just go do whatever you want. So that's how I took university to my degree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both Brian and Matt. My education was in mechanical engineering, but my profession is in structural engineering. So absolutely, those fundamentals key. For our next question, it's for Brian. And what advice do you have for students looking to secure their first job in the industry after graduating?
I would say to network, and I'm trying to think back what I didn't do, what I should have done that would have made my life easier. I kind of got lucky in the job I got because, well, a friend told me, hey, there's this utility. I was really more into robotics and missile systems, and like, hey, there's this utility, they do power, and like, that's not really that interesting, although it is very interesting now. But I would say networking, getting internships, which I didn't do either. So I noticed when I applied for jobs, that's what they asked for, and I didn't get internship. But the networking part, even just joining organizations such as AAae or AAae, you meet a lot of people, and that carries through not just for getting a job. I noticed that right now in my current career, a lot of my jobs are through my past networks, and that's just showing you've done a good job, and they'll award you large contracts. Say, hey, here's a job, put out a bid, and they know who they want to give it to. So I would say networking to get a first job, but that continues throughout your whole career.
Appreciate that, Brian. And if anybody's looking for a great professional organization to join, AAae is the one. I'll open up the floor to any other panelists if they want to chime in. Okay, our next question is for Matt. What are some common misconceptions of your profession in comparison to the realities of it? And why do you think the misconceptions persist?
Yeah. One of the, and I have a few that I can probably go on, I'll try to keep myself in check, but the way I'd phrase it is, one of the misconceptions, especially when people are thinking about entering it, is that there is only one career path, right? You're going into this major to go get this job. And the reality, that's not what it is. There's such a great, even in our firm alone, right? We have people who, we have a lawyer, we have our marketing, we have our, we have leadership in my side, operational side, doing business. We have the technical engineering. There are so many different aspects to the career path that if you like the field and the why of that field resonates with you, your specific interests and skills, there's a home for you, right? And that's one of the ones I've always found at the student level. I think a couple of the ones that I want to put out there is sometimes you hear, oh, you're an engineer, you've made it. I will tell you, this job can be stressful. I would be lying to you if it wasn't, because you got to be right. You got to make sure that you're right. There's a lot leaning on, on that. So there is stress to this job, a lot of big responsibility, but the reward is so worth it. And I'm not just talking financial. What I am talking about is the difference that you're really making in the community with things that you leave behind. That's that reward that actually every one of us has touched on today, is the difference that you end up making. And that becomes your motivator. Is the dollars are what they are, but it's really the why and the reason and the motivation behind what you're doing and the difference you leave behind that gets you showing up every single day. I can keep going for hours, but I'll stop there and see what else people want to see if there's anyone else maybe wants to add to it. Otherwise, I can chime on some more.
Thanks, Matt. Does any other panelists want to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize there is responsibilities. As you know, there's that recent thing that happened in Florida. You know, there's probably some engineering or construction things that happen there, but you have responsibility to not kill anybody, and that goes for a lot of the trades. And so yeah, as far as misconceptions with electrical, like when someone says you're an electrical engineer, they think they could go and build a computer for you, or they think you can, you know, wire up their house. I mean, which many people do. That it's such a broad range of things with electrical engineering. But you'll meet engineers that don't know how to turn on a PC, and electrical engineer, and you'll meet them who can't even wire up a light switch. So the point is, there's a lot of things in this industry. And if you enter it, whether it's electrical, structural, civil, mechanical, there's many things that you can do.
And I'm going to pile on my own just because I can, right?
Please.
No, it's all about math. You know, people actually think that what we do is math. Math, you know, so really that's another language. It has the same sentence structure. It has the same thing. Math is a means to tell a story that conveys a concept to reality. And what it is a communication tool. So what we do every day is actually communicate between an idea to another idea and fill the gap using math and science to be able to get there. And so the business is really about communication and knowing how to communicate to somebody else so that they receive the message that you're trying to deliver successfully. So communication really, really, really matters. Even when you're doing something where you think wouldn't have any part of it. It's everything.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
I feel like I'd be missing an opportunity if I didn't jump in and say that there's a misconception that this industry is just for boys. Plenty of us in the industry, you know, every year there's more and more women getting interested in the construction industry. You know, if you're good at something, you enjoy something, do it. Simple as that. And you know, I work with a ton of just really wonderful, brilliant professionals. You know, and it's been a pleasure working in the industry. So if there's any female students who are joining us today, definitely don't feel like this is, you know, something that you shouldn't just go for because a bunch of us did and it's great.
Thank you so much for adding that. I absolutely. Okay, for our next question, it's directed towards Brian. What are some major changes that are happening or will happen in your industry? What are the cascading impacts of these changes?
The biggest thing going on is renewables. So there's a lot of money being spent in renewables. We're fortunate to be in Los Angeles, where they have the capability and the money to go towards 100% renewables, and that's actually what's happening in LA 100 plan. But as far as the power system, you'll see that we're transitioning more and more to solar and wind, that being non-dispatchable energy. So they got to have batteries for storage, compressed air, and what they're looking at is what's called green hydrogen. And it's not just a generation sources now to manage that. There's automation involved, and that gets into a whole new sector. Security issues with power systems being hacked. So the power system is a critical infrastructure, so there's regulations around that. So I think that's a huge change going towards renewables, and it impacts a lot of industries. Even at the building level, I mentioned before, electric vehicles, electrifying everything, as you know, with bus and vehicle charging. Even the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, they're changing their cranes to be electrified now instead of diesel powered. So yeah, that is the biggest change, and it's impacting for the good, you know, with climate change and everything.
Thanks, Brian. Does anybody else want to chime in here?
Similarly, with climate change and resource availability, the world of water is drastically changing. think I mentioned it earlier that water is kind of where energy was 15 years ago. Getting to net positive energy is an easy thing. Now you throw some PV on a building, a couple of windmills up, maybe a few batteries, and you're there. Yeah, I know it's not that simple, but water's getting that way. Water's becoming more and more expensive. It's becoming more of a scarce resource. Pollution is getting worse and worse, and so the quantity of water that we have is actually dwindling. Overpumping in places like the Central Valley in California right now is causing collapsing of the aquifer and sinking of the earth. And if you get too much into it, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, which is unfortunate, but I see that as opportunity. It's opportunity to do something better. And so I see a lot of change in our industry in regards to water. Our concept of the water cycle is broken. So you're no longer going to see once use water. Your water is going to have to do more than one thing for you. And we're going to have to change our idea on what reuse is. Right now, we've got this idea that you turn on the drain, water comes out, you hit the flush valve, it goes down the toilet, something magic happens in the background, and all of a sudden we start over again. It's a very linear process right now. So changing that, changing the way of thought, the changing the way we approach water is going to be paramount as we address climate change, address the drought in California, even snowmageddon here in Texas back in February. I did melt snow to flush my toilet, which was never a pleasant experience. So I'm excited where the industry is going. I'm excited to be part of that change to help redefine the water cycle and redefine water use within a building.
That's very interesting. I thought that was an interesting framing, the linear versus cyclical use of the water. All right, and I'll move on to our final question, which is for John and Matt, and of course all the other panelists. And this is, what do you personally look for in an employee? John's, let's start with you.
Personality. I think that's the best way to put it. My last internship, we offered, I think we got 180 applicants for a single position. And so if your resume is lucky enough to make it to my desk, you're getting about 5 minutes of my time, if even that. So I'm really looking for something that makes you different from the crowd. Be passionate about something. I do a lot of resume workshops, and I met with one individual, and their resume read like a robot. There was nothing personal on that at all. And I asked the student why, and their reply was, well, I don't want to put anything on there that's going to prevent me from getting a job. If you put that you like Frisbee golf on your resume and someone decides not to hire you because you like Frisbee golf, is that really a place you want to work? I don't. And another great example, as I was interviewing with Integral Group and trying to get my job there, one of the questions I was asked during the interview is, well, Jonathan, what's something you're passionate about? Well, I blanked. I didn't want to just say getting a paycheck, because that was kind of important to me at the time. So I went off on this half-hour tangent about barbecue and cooking competitions and this passion that I have that is completely separate from engineering, but something I completely geek out about. And out of that hour-long interview, I think we talked engineering maybe 10 minutes. And before I even got home that day, I had an offer waiting for me in my inbox. So my advice, be personable, be unique, be passionate, make me want to hire you. Don't strive to be just a staff engineer. Strive to be passion in what you do.
And step up your barbecue game. And same question for Matt.
Yeah, so there'll be some interesting parallels, I think, from what I look for to what John was speaking about. And the default one is we're always looking for talent, right? We want we want some skill, we want some insight, we want, we want talent. But that's normally when somebody gets to my desk, we know you got talent. You've gone through the program, you got a baseline, you got skill, but we got to acknowledge that you got to have that talent to get in the door. But once you do, and once the conversation happens, what I care about, just like John, is I care that you care. You care about something, that you're always trying your best. And I want to see that come through. That you care about the person on the other side of the conversation, that you empathize with their situation, their perspective, their needs as much as you care about your needs. I'm looking for somebody who understands and cares about the why, not just the process of doing, but the process of why. Why invest the time? Why? Always why? Cares about that. If that comes across as authentic, all of that, you're being you. That's truly you, and you're authentic in the communicating of that. You're going to get in the door. You're the person that we want. You're the one not only with the skills and the personality, who will become part of the family that we're going to work with for decades, right? Like that's how we look at it. I'm hiring people that I'm going to work with for 20 decades, or not 20 decades, 20 years, 2 decades. God, I'm not, I don't want to even think about that. Retirement at some point. But right, I mean, that's what we're looking for. Your passion has to come through for life and for what you're doing at that moment, at that time. That has to come through.
Those were 2 fantastic answers. Does any other panelists want to chime in?
Yeah, I could add to that. I also look for someone that is personable. Like also what Matt's saying is, you're going to work with this person many hours a day for years, and so you want someone that you could work with. I mean, sometimes it's not a match. I mean, kind of like a relationship, not a romantic one, but a business relationship. You want to be able to come to work happy and talk to this person. As far as the talent, it's hard to gauge, if how talented they are and if they're even interested in the work you're doing. But you have to be able to do the job. If not, you're gonna get let go in a few months anyway. That'll come through. So as far as your skill, that is expected. But to get hired during the interview process, I think I'd like to talk about barbecue rather than just engineering. Because whether it's frisbee or barbecue, you want to talk to somebody that is personable, and if they have an interest in something, then they're probably a good employee because at least they have passion and interest in something, and it doesn't have to be with engineering. It could be something outside of that.
I think we all look for something really similar. I was going to say, I always want to find someone who I can tell that they want to be on my team. I'm holding that interview because I need it. I need someone on my team. I want someone on my team. We've got the work. And, I want someone who wants to be on that team. And I don't mean you only work in a team environment. I know that question comes up a lot. Do you work better as an individual or a team player? You can absolutely work as either. But in construction, we're a team. There's no, denying that. So I want someone that wants to be there, someone that shows up, knows about the role or knows about the company, comes with questions, you're engaged. It's a 2-direction dialogue because you're as excited to be there as we're excited to have you there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amanda. All right. So that concludes the individual questions. I don't see any questions in the chat, but we'll give everybody 30 seconds, please. If you have anything on your mind, now's the chance to get it on the board. I guess that's just how compelling we were.
That works.
Yeah. When is the barbecue in Austin? Asked Paulette. I imagine this is for you, John.
October 21st.
Do you cook everything, or is there a particular cut that you do?
It's our first annual AAae barbecue benefit competition. So we're keeping it easy. We're just going to do a 2+1 category. So probably ribs and chicken that You cook in the afternoon, and then we'll have one category called just everything else.
And the date again, John?
October 21.
All right, October 21. Everybody be in Austin at the Ace Barbecue.
Right before Halloween.
Sorry, October 23. I got my weekend wrong.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our second session of the AAae Foundation's AEC Careers Explained series. First and foremost, I want to extend a sincere thank you to all our panelists for taking the time to share their experiences with us today. For the audience, note that a recording of this session will be available online through the AAae Foundation website. The next webinar in this series will be focused on civil engineering and will take place September 14th. Please mark the date in your calendars and share with your friends and colleagues. Information on the event will be distributed shortly through email. And finally, as always, you can find AAae on all major social media platforms. Please connect with us to keep up to date to news and on future events. And thank you all for joining us. I hope you guys have a great night.
Jason, we actually have one question.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I'm sorry, I missed that. This is from Julian, and it's for Matt.
Huh?
What do I have to do to be a part of your mentorship program? He is a high school student that has a large interest in civil engineering.
So I will say join ACE mentoring. I think you've heard it enough times tonight. That is the magical trick. I mean, a lot of us have had touches to that, organization. I've known Nick for way too long because of it, and same with Paulette. And it's really, I knew Nick when he was, I don't know, lots a lot younger because of that association. And it, to me, the
I might have
beauty of
eaten a
that,
Mario mushroom. I might have gained 2 inches.
to me, that's ACE is by far the best thing that I have found in the high school level to get introduced to the field. And it's not just because it's civil, it's understanding the breadth of things that come in. But, ultimately, you're going to get to college, and there's a lot of different things that you can try. And what I tell you in college, the thing that actually was most effective for me was getting involved in the student projects. If you like doing the student projects, whether it be, when I was in school, we had aeronautical, I had something called aero brick. The civil engineers had steel bridge, concrete canoe. They were just starting to do with hybrid vehicles at Davis at the time when I started. And so there's a program where the school actually built a hybrid car in tandem with Honda, I believe is who they were doing it with at Davis. Those real life projects really helped me refine where I wanted to go. So start with ACE and then embrace the full breadth of opportunity at the college level. Hopefully,
Thanks,
Julian,
Matt.
that got your answer.
Yeah, huge plug for ACE. I mean, our firm, and I think every firm in the region is pretty involved in the program. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can't say
And
enough good
Paulette
things
just
about it.
provided an email. Please email her.
Okay.
All right,
All
I
right.
guess that's it.
Yeah, I think that concludes it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, good
Thank
meeting
you.
all of you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank you,
so much.
everyone.
And definitely, Jonathan, I will be, I haven't met you yet. I'm in your new regional director, so I will definitely be coming out for that barbecue. So thanks for giving me that date. I'm like, I better get that on my calendar quick.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
It sounds like
I
it.
think I'm banned from cooking, but I'm definitely going to be one of the judges. And we need more judges, so let us know.
Ooh, I do like that. And Jason, I don't know if you know, but ACE was started by Thornton Tomasetti.
Get out.
If you knew that little fun fact. I can keep talking about ACE, but I will thank you again, everybody. This was fantastic. I learned so much. It's always great to hear where everyone's paths comes from. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.